It was the gentle sound of ice clinking against glass that made me look up from my gardening magazine. My son David stood there, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the kitchen window, his silhouette outlined in gold as he extended a glass of water toward me. "Here, Mom. You've been reading for hours. You must be thirsty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I stared at the clear liquid, watching tiny bubbles rising to the surface, catching the light like miniature diamonds before disappearing. Just yesterday, those same hands that now offered hydration had signed papers that put a price on my existence. My throat tightened as the memory washed over me with painful clarity. I had only discovered it by accident. If I hadn't gone to Walter, Breslin's office to update my own will, I never would have known. Walter had been our family attorney for over 30 years. He'd handled everything from the purchase of our first home to my husband Michael's estate after his passing 5 years. Ago. When I stepped into his wood-paneled office yesterday morning, I had expected nothing more than a routine appointment. "Elaine," Walter had said, his gravelly voice somehow softer than usual. "I was actually going to call you later this week. There's something I think you should know." That something had been a life insurance policy, a substantial one. $5 million, to be exact. The beneficiary, my only child David, the insured, me. What made my stomach turn wasn't the policy itself. Many children take out policies on aging parents to cover funeral expenses or outstanding debts. No, what sent ice through my veins was the date. The policy had been initiated just 3 weeks after David's wife Vanessa had suffered her second miscarriage, and 1 week after I had mentioned to them that I was considering selling my house to travel during my retirement years. My house, the Victorian on Maple Street that had been in my family for 3 generations. The house David had grown up in. The house Michael and I had lovingly restored room by room over the decades. The house that, as David had reminded me countless times, should stay in the family. "Mom?" David's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." I accepted the water with what I hoped was a convincing smile. "Just a little tired, that's all." He settled into the chair across from me, his face a perfect mask of concern. David had always been handsome, taking after his father with those piercing blue eyes and strong jaw. At 42, with flecks of distinguished silver at his temples, he had the kind of appearance that inspired trust, a trust I was now questioning with every fiber of my being. "Maybe you should see Dr. Marlowe," he suggested, leaning forward. "You haven't been yourself lately." What a carefully crafted observation. How long had he been watching me, cataloging my movements, my health, my habits? I sipped the water slowly, wondering if my paranoia was justified. Would my own son, the boy I had nursed through chicken pox and heartbreaks, whose college education I had worked overtime to fund, actually wish for my premature departure from this world? The water tasted normal enough, cool and refreshing as it slid down my throat, but knowledge is a poison of its own kind, tainting everything it touches. "I'm fine, David. Just thinking about what to do with the East Garden this year." The grandfather. Clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, its deep resonance filling the silence that had settled between us. 3 o'clock. Vanessa would be finishing her shift at the hospital soon. As if reading my thoughts, David checked his watch. "I should get going. I promised Vanessa I'd pick up groceries before dinner." He stood, hesitating slightly. "Are you sure you're all right, Mom? You know you can tell me anything." The irony of his statement was not lost on me. I nodded, forcing another smile. "Of course, dear. Give Vanessa my love." I watched him leave through the front door, wondering when exactly my son had become a stranger to me. Was it gradual, like water slowly eroding stone, or had it happened in an instant, with the stroke of a pen on an insurance document? After the sound of his car faded into the distance, I placed the half-empty glass on the side table and made my way to my study. The room had been Michael's once, with its dark mahogany desk and walls lined with leather-bound books. Now it was mine. The one space in the house where I felt I could think clearly. I settled into the chair and opened my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What exactly was I looking for? Proof of my son's intentions? Evidence that would either condemn or exonerate him in my mind? I began with a simple search. Life insurance policies on parents. The results were innocuous enough. Articles about estate planning, ensuring funeral costs were covered, the practical aspects of aging parents. Nothing sinister. I tried another. Search. Signs someone is planning your murder. This yielded more disturbing results, each more paranoid-inducing than the last. I closed the laptop, suddenly feeling foolish. This was David, my son. The boy who had once refused to kill spiders. In the house, insisting we catch and release them into the garden. The young man who had sat by his father's hospital bed for weeks, reading aloud from Michael's favorite novels as cancer slowly claimed him. Could he really harbor such darkness? Yet the insurance policy existed. $5 million. Taken out without my knowledge or consent. My cell phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Sandra, my oldest friend. Elaine? Are we still on for bridge tomorrow? Yes, of course, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Are you okay? You sound strange. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hesitated. Sandra had known me for over 40 years. We had weathered divorces, hers, widowhood, mine, and everything in between. If there was anyone I could confide in, it was her. Actually, San, I need your advice on something. Can you come over tonight? I'll bring wine, she said without hesitation. 7 o'clock? Perfect. Thank you. After hanging up, I walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The family photographs lining the staircase. David at 5, proudly displaying a missing front tooth. David at 18, in his graduation cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders. David and Vanessa on their wedding day 7 years ago, looking into each other's eyes with such hope and promise. Had it all been a lie? Or was I the one fabricating a nightmare from an innocent financial decision? The doorbell rang at precisely 7. Sandra had always been punctual, a trait I had always appreciated but especially valued tonight. She took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together, she promised, holding up a bottle of Merlot. Now pour us both a glass and tell me everything. And so I did. I told her about Walter's revelation, about the insurance policy, about my growing suspicions, and the water David had so carefully handed me earlier that day. Sandra listened without interruption, her expressive face shifting from shock to concern to thoughtful consideration. When I finished, she took a long sip of her wine before speaking. Have you asked him about it directly? I shook my head. I'm afraid to. What if I'm wrong and I damage our relationship forever? Or worse, what if I'm right and tipping my hand puts me in actual danger? Elaine, Sandra said gently. This is David we're talking about, your son, the boy who cried for a week when his pet goldfish died. People change, San. You didn't see his face when I mentioned selling the house last month. It was like I'd suggested burning down a sacred temple. He and Vanessa have been trying for a baby for 3 years now. They want to raise their child in this house, continue the family legacy. What if he decided I've become an obstacle to that dream? Sandra set down her glass. Then we need to find out for sure one way or another. No more speculation. We need facts. How? First, we get a copy of that insurance policy. Walter can provide that, right? Then we start paying attention, not just to David, but to Vanessa too. Have there been other changes in their behavior? Financial problems we don't know about? And most importantly, we need to protect you while we figure this out. I felt a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. Having a plan, even a tentative one, made the situation seem less overwhelming. I'll call Walter in the morning, I agreed. But what about protection? Do you think I should go to the police? Sandra frowned. With what? An insurance policy isn't proof of criminal intent. No, for now, I think you should stay with me. Tell David you're having electrical work done in the house or something. Buy us time to investigate. It was a sensible suggestion. I could pack a bag tonight, be out of the house by morning. But something held me back. This is my home, San. I've lived here for 45 years. If I leave now, I might never feel safe coming back. Sandra studied me for a long moment. Then we bring in reinforcements. My nephew Ryan works for a security company. He can sweep the house for cameras or listening devices, install a few security measures of our own. At least then you'll know. If someone's watching you? You think David might be spying on me? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I think we need to consider all possibilities. People do desperate things for money, Elaine. Even good people. Even family. After Sandra left, I found myself unable to sleep. I paced the house, checking locks on windows and doors, peering into dark corners as if they might hold answers. In the kitchen, I stared at the glass David had given me, still sitting on the side table where I had left it. On impulse, I wrapped it in a clean dish towel and placed it in a Ziploc bag. Evidence, though of what exactly, I wasn't yet sure. Morning brought a gray drizzle that matched my mood. I called Walter's office as soon as it opened, requesting copies of all documents related to any insurance policies naming me as the insured. His secretary sounded surprised, but promised to have them ready by noon. Next, I called Sandra, who confirmed that her nephew Ryan could come by this afternoon to check the house. Then I made one final call to my doctor, requesting a full toxicology, screening under the guise of persistent fatigue. If David was attempting to poison me, I needed to know. At 11:30, my phone chimed with a text from David. Thinking of stopping by for lunch. Need anything from town? My heart raced as I stared at the message. Was this a normal check-in from a concerned son, or was he monitoring me, ensuring his plan, whatever it might be, was progressing as expected? I typed back, "Not today, sorry. Having lunch with Sandra to plan our trip." There was no trip, of course, but the lie came easily. Too easily, perhaps. Was this what my relationship with my son had come to? Calculated falsehoods and veiled suspicions? His response came quickly. Trip? What trip? I hesitated, then replied, "Just a weekend away. Girl time. We've been planning it for ages." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as David composed his response. Finally, "You never mentioned a trip before. Where are you going?" The question felt pointed, almost accusatory. Why did he need to know? To ensure I actually left? Or to track me down if necessary? Not sure yet. Sandra's handling the details. I'll let you know once it's finalized. I turned off my phone after sending the message, unwilling to continue the conversation. Each exchange felt like walking through a minefield, every word potentially revealing. Too much. At noon, I drove to Walter's office to collect the documents. The manila envelope he provided was thicker than I expected. There are actually 2 policies, Walter explained, his expression grave. The second one was taken out just last month, another $3 million, $8 million. The amount seemed to hang in the air between us, obscene in its magnitude. Walter, I said quietly, in your professional opinion, is this normal? For a son to insure his mother's life for such a sum without her knowledge? The attorney removed his glasses, polishing them slowly with his handkerchief. Nothing about this situation is typical, Elaine. The amounts are unusually high for a parent-child policy, and the fact that you weren't informed is concerning. Could Could David actually collect if something happened to me, even if he was responsible? Walter's eyes met mine, understanding dawning in their depths. No reputable insurance company would pay out if the beneficiary was implicated in the death. But Elaine, are you suggesting what I think you are? I couldn't bring myself to say the words aloud. To accuse my own son of plotting my murder seemed both melodramatic and terrifyingly plausible. I don't know what I'm suggesting, I admitted. I just need to understand why. Back in my car, I opened the envelope and began reading through the documents. The policies were straightforward enough, though the amounts made my head spin. What caught my attention, however, was the medical information section. According to the form, I had undergone a physical examination by a Dr. Thomas Ramirez, who had declared me in excellent health for a woman of 65. I had never met Dr. Ramirez. I had never had this examination. The form had my signature on it, a reasonable facsimile, though clearly not in my handwriting. Someone had forged my name, my medical history, my consent. My hands trembled as I started the car. This was no longer about paranoia or misunderstanding. This was fraud at minimum, and at worst, the foundation of something far more sinister. I pulled into my driveway. I noticed David's car parked on the street. My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to be here. I had told him I would be with Sandra. Had he come to check on me? Or had he come for something else entirely? I sat in my car, the engine still running, the insurance documents clutched in my hands. Through the bay window of my living room, I could see his silhouette moving about inside my house. In that moment, I had to make a decision. Confront him with what I knew, risking whatever might follow, or retreat, regroup, and formulate a plan that would keep me safe while I uncovered the full extent of his betrayal. The choice I made then would change everything. It would define not just my relationship with my son, but possibly the remaining years of my life. I turned off the engine and reached for my phone. I dialed Sandra's number, keeping my eyes fixed on the silhouette moving. Behind my curtains. He's in my house, I whispered when she answered. David. I told him I'd be with you, but he's here, inside, and I'm sitting in my car with insurance documents that prove he forged my signature. Don't go in, Sandra said immediately. Drive away, Elaine. Come to my place right now. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. But this is my home. Why should I run? This isn't about pride. If what we suspect is true, I need to know for sure, I cut her off. Ryan is coming this afternoon, isn't he? To check the house? Yes, but then I'll confront David now with you on the phone. If anything happens, you'll hear it. And if I don't call you back within an hour, you send Ryan straight over. Or the police. Sandra's sigh carried through the phone. At least leave the line open. Put me on mute and keep the phone in your pocket. Okay. I hesitated, suddenly afraid. San, if I'm wrong about all this, I've become a terrible mother. And if you're right, you're a woman fighting for her life. Text me when you're safely inside, so I know you made it in. I tucked the insurance papers into my purse, slipped my phone into my jacket pocket with Sandra still on the line, and finally stepped out of the car. The short walk to my front door felt like crossing a battlefield, each step carrying me further, from safety and closer to a confrontation I never imagined having. I used my key, though it was my own home, unwilling to announce my presence with the doorbell. The familiar creak of the hinges sounded unnaturally loud to my ears as I stepped into the foyer. David, I called out, feigning normalcy despite the hammering of my heart. He appeared in the doorway of the living room, a flash of surprise crossing his face before settling into a smile. Mom, I thought you were having lunch with Sandra. Plans changed, I said, watching him carefully. What are you doing here? I thought you had work today. I was worried about you. You seemed off yesterday, and then you mentioned this sudden trip. He shrugged, the picture of filial concern. I just wanted to check on you, make sure everything was okay. I set my purse down on the console table, deliberately leaving it unzipped, the corner of the manila envelope visible. By letting yourself into my house when you thought I wasn't home? His expression tightened fractionally. I have a key, Mom. You gave it to me for emergencies. Is this an emergency? We stood facing each other in the hallway, the air between us charged with unspoken accusations. David looked the same as he always did, my son, with his father's eyes and my stubborn chin. But something had shifted. The lens through which I viewed him had been irreparably altered. You're acting strange, he said finally. Vanessa thinks you might be having mini-strokes, memory lapses, mood changes. The casual mention of potential cognitive decline sent ice through my veins. How convenient it would be if I began to appear mentally unstable. How easy to dismiss my concerns, or accusations as the ramblings of a deteriorating mind. I'm perfectly fine, David. My mind is clear. I moved toward the living room, forcing him to step aside. Though I have been forgetting things lately, like when exactly I authorized you to take out life insurance policies on me. His face remained impressively neutral, but I caught the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the momentary stillness. What are you talking about? $8 million, David. That's quite a sum to wager on your mother's demise. Mom, don't. I held up a hand. Don't insult me with lies. I spoke to Walter yesterday. I have the documents in my purse right now, including the forms with my forged signature and a physical exam from a doctor I've never met. David's mask slipped then, revealing something cold and calculating in his eyes. It vanished quickly, replaced by wounded innocence. It's not what you think. Those policies are for your protection. My protection? I couldn't contain the bitter laugh that escaped me. How exactly does your collecting millions upon my death protect me? For your care, then, if you get sick, if you need expensive treatments or long-term nursing, the money ensures you'll have the best. Then why is it payable to you and not to me? Why take it out without telling me? Why forge my signature? Each question landed like a stone between us. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. It's complicated, Mom. The way these policies are structured, the tax implications. Stop lying to me. The force of my voice surprised us both. I raised you better than this. Whatever's really going on, I deserve the truth. Something shifted in his expression then, a coldness settling over his features like frost. The truth? He moved closer, his voice dropping. The truth is that this house is worth over $1 million in today's market, and you were talking about selling it to go gallivanting around the world. The truth is that Vanessa and I need stability, a family home, not an empty bank account. After you've blown through Dad's legacy and your own retirement on cruises and guided tours, I stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with the boy I had raised. So the policies are, what? Your way of ensuring you get the house no matter what? They're my way of securing our future. Vanessa can't have children, Mom. We found out last month. The fertility treatments failed. We're going to adopt, but we need to show financial stability, a permanent home. His voice cracked slightly, genuine emotion breaking through. This house is all we have left of Dad, all our future. Children will ever know of him. I couldn't let you sell it on a whim. For a moment, sympathy threatened to overtake my caution. The pain in his voice was real, the longing for children, the connection to his father. But it didn't explain everything. I'm sorry about the fertility treatments, I said quietly. Truly. But David, if this was just about the house, why not talk to me? Why the deception? And why 2 separate policies totaling $8 million when the house is worth far less? He turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. Michael had once tended with such care. The second policy was Vanessa's idea. She thought, She said we should be prepared for all contingencies. A chill ran through me. What contingencies exactly? You're not getting any younger, Mom. He spoke to the window, not to me. Elderly care is expensive. End-of-life care even more so. And if you're determined to travel, to live out some eat, pray, love fantasy in your 60s, the risks increase. Foreign hospitals, accidents abroad. We needed to be covered for worst-case scenarios. And the forged signature? The fake medical exam? He finally turned back to face me. You would have said no. You would have made it into a whole thing about trust and boundaries, like you're doing right now, instead of seeing it as me trying to protect our family's future. Our family. The words hung between us, hollow and twisted. Is that what this is about? Protecting the family? David stepped closer, his expression softening into something that might have been genuine concern, or might have been the calculated performance of a man who had already decided his mother's fate. Let me make you some tea. We can talk about this calmly. I can explain everything better if you'll just listen. The glass of water from yesterday flashed in my mind. I took a step back. I'm not thirsty. His face hardened again, the mask of concern falling away. You think I'm trying to poison you? My own mother? Do you hear how paranoid that sounds? I don't know what to think anymore. I moved toward my purse, needing the security of having my phone and the documents within reach. All I know is that you've been lying to me, going behind my back, making decisions about my life and death without my knowledge or consent. Because you're not thinking clearly. His voice rose, frustration breaking through. Ever since Dad died, you've been making one impulsive decision after another. The gardening classes, the pottery workshop, and now selling the house to travel? It's like you're having some kind of delayed midlife crisis. And I'm the only one being rational here. Rational? I stared at him incredulously. You call fraud and deception rational? I call protecting our family's legacy rational. I call ensuring my children have the same stability I had growing up rational. He advanced toward me, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. What's irrational is a 65-year-old widow suddenly deciding to upend her entire life and squander her son's inheritance on frivolous experiences. The word inheritance hung in the air between us, damning in its implication. In his mind, my resources, my home, my savings, my very life were already factored into his balance sheet, assets waiting to be claimed. This is still my house, I said quietly. And it's still my life. I decide what happens to both. Something ugly flashed across his face. For now. Those two words, spoken with such cold certainty, confirmed every fear I had been struggling to dismiss. This wasn't about protection or family legacy. This was about ownership, about viewing me as a means to an end rather than as a person with agency and plans of my own. I think you should leave, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, and I think you should reconsider your position. He moved toward the front door, but paused with his hand on the knob. Family should support each other, Mom. Don't make me choose between my future children and you. You won't like the outcome. After he left, I stood in the foyer, trembling. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unmuting the call. Sandra? Did you hear that? Every word, she replied, her voice tight with anger. Elaine, this is worse than we thought. The way he spoke to you, those threats, they weren't exactly threats, I said automatically. The habit of defending my son still ingrained despite everything. For now? You won't like the outcome? Those are textbook threats. And that nonsense about you being irrational. He's setting the stage, Elaine. Creating a narrative of mental decline that he can use later. I sank onto the bench by the door, suddenly exhausted. What do I do, San? He's my son, my only child. First, you document everything. The policies, today's conversation, any other suspicious behavior. Second, you protect yourself legally. Call Walter back, revoke David's power of attorney if he has it, update your will to exclude him if necessary. And third, most importantly, you don't eat or drink anything he gives you, not a drop. The practical advice anchored me, giving me a path forward through the shock and betrayal. Ryan is still coming this afternoon? Yes, and now I'm coming with him. We'll sweep the house, set up some security, make sure you're safe until we figure out our next steps. After ending the call, I made my way to the kitchen, needing the comfort of familiar surroundings. On the counter sat a shopping bag I hadn't noticed earlier. Inside were groceries, bread, milk, fresh fruit, and a bottle of my favorite herbal tea. A note in David's handwriting read, "Thought you might need these. Love you, Mom." The mundane domesticity of it struck me as both touching and terrifying. Was this the action of a dutiful son, or a calculated performance designed to maintain his cover? Had the groceries been purchased before or after he knew I had discovered the insurance policies? Were they safe to consume, or... I dumped the entire bag into the trash, feeling both paranoid and justified. My phone chimed with a text from David. "I'm sorry we argued. Vanessa and I would love to have you over for dinner tonight to talk things through calmly. She's making your favorite meatloaf." Another chime followed seconds later. "Please, Mom, let's not let this misunderstanding come between us. Family is everything. Family is everything." The same sentiment Michael used to express with such genuine warmth now felt like a threat in our son's hands. I didn't respond to the texts. Instead, I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old suitcase from under the bed. If David could make contingency plans, so could I. I began packing methodically: clothes, toiletries, medications, important documents. Not for a hasty retreat to Sandra's, but as a precaution. A recognition that my own home might no longer be safe for me. As I folded a sweater into the case, my gaze fell on the framed photo on my nightstand. David at 7, sitting on Michael's shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing in the sun. The image blurred as tears filled my eyes. Where had that laughing boy gone? When had he transformed into a man who could look at his mother and calculate her worth in death? The doorbell rang, startling me from my memories. I glanced at the clock, too early for Sandra and Ryan. Through the bedroom window, I could see a van parked in the driveway, unmarked except for a small logo on the side that I couldn't make out from this distance. The bell rang again, more insistent. This time, I approached the front door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man in what appeared to be utility company coveralls stood on my porch, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Turner?" he called through the door. "I'm from the water department. We've had reports of contamination in the area. Need to test your supply." I frowned. There had been no notices, no neighborhood alerts about water issues. And the timing, coming so soon after my confrontation with David. "I didn't receive any notification about water testing," I said through the door, not unlocking it. "It's an emergency measure, ma'am. Several of your neighbors have reported discoloration and odd tastes. We're checking every house on the block. Today." Something felt wrong. The van, the lack of advance notice, the sudden urgency. I reached for my phone to call the water company directly, to verify this man's identity and purpose. Before I could dial, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Don't open the door. Not water department. Call police." I froze, staring at the message. Who had sent it? How did they know what was happening at my door right now? This man outside knocked again, harder this time. "Mrs. Turner, it's really important we check your water today. Won't take but a few minutes of your time." I stepped away from the door, heart pounding, and dialed 911. "Emergency services, what's your emergency?" "There's a man at my door claiming to be from the water department," I whispered, moving deeper into the house, away from the front entrance. "I have reason to believe he's lying, and I'm afraid for my safety." Is the person attempting to enter your home? A loud crash answered the question as the front door splintered inward. I dropped the phone and ran. Pure instinct drove me toward the back of the house, away from the splintering door and the heavy footsteps that followed. The 911 operator's voice called out from the fallen phone, tinny and distant. Ma'am, are you there? The intruder would hear that. He would know I'd called for help. I darted into the kitchen, frantically scanning for a weapon. The knife block sat on the counter, but reaching it would put me in plain sight of the hallway. Instead, I grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove and pressed myself against the wall beside the doorway, heart hammering so loudly I was certain it would give away my position. Mrs. Turner? The man's voice had dropped all pretense of professional courtesy. I know you're in here. Let's make this easy, shall we? Easy. As if there was anything easy about being hunted in your own home. I gripped the skillet tighter, trying to control my breathing, to think past the panic clouding my mind. The kitchen had 2 exits, the main doorway to the hall, and a smaller door leading to the laundry room, which in turn connected to the garage. If I could make it to the garage, I might escape through the side door or even use Michael's old workbench to barricade myself until help arrived. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. He was checking rooms methodically. Dining room, study, living room, coming closer. I eased toward the laundry room door, keeping my back to the wall. 3 more steps. 2. 1. My elbow bumped a mug sitting on the counter edge. It wobbled, teetered, and despite my desperate grab, crashed to the floor in an explosion of ceramic shards. The footsteps quickened, rushing toward the kitchen. I abandoned, stealth, and bolted for the laundry room, yanking the door shut behind me and twisting the flimsy lock. It wouldn't hold. It was designed for privacy, not security, but it might buy precious seconds. The laundry room was small, windowless, with bare concrete floors and the lingering scent of detergent. I lunged for the door to the garage, twisting. The knob frantically locked. From the other side, a solid kick hit the laundry room door, the thin wood already splintering around the lock. Another kick would break it open completely. Trapped between doors, I backed up against the washing machine, raising the skillet in trembling hands. If I was going down, I wouldn't go without a fight. The next kick sent the door crashing inward. The man who stepped through was taller than he'd appeared through the peephole, broad-shouldered and expressionless. Not a utility worker despite the coveralls. His eyes flicked to the skillet in my hands, assessing, dismissing. Mrs. Turner, he said, his voice oddly formal. I'm not here to hurt you. Then why break down my door? I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. Because what? I have to tell you couldn't wait, and you wouldn't have believed me otherwise. He reached slowly into his pocket, telegraphing the movement as if to reassure me. I'm going to show you identification. Please don't hit me with that skillet. He extracted a leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a badge and ID card. Jack Mercer, private investigator. He held it out for me to see. I was hired to watch your house. My grip on the skillet didn't loosen. By who? That's what I came to tell you. I was hired by your daughter-in-law, Vanessa Turner. Of all the answers I might have expected, this wasn't one of them. Vanessa? Why would she? A wailing siren cut through the air outside, growing louder by the second. The police responding to my 911 call. Jack Mercer grimaced. That complicates things. Look, Mrs. Turner, we don't have much time. Vanessa hired me 3 weeks ago to document your son's activities. She believes he's planning to harm you for the insurance money. My mind reeled, trying to process this new information. That's not possible. They're together in this. He told me the second policy was her idea. He lied. Vanessa discovered the first policy by accident. When she confronted him, he convinced her it was just financial planning, nothing sinister. but she didn't trust his explanation. That's when she contacted me. The sirens stopped abruptly, replaced by car doors slamming and voices shouting outside. "Police! Open up!" Jack glanced toward the sound. "I need to go. Coming in the way I did was a mistake, but I had to warn you. Don't trust the food in your house. Don't trust anything David gives you. And most importantly, don't let him know that you suspect him." "Why should I believe you?" I demanded, even as doubt crept into my certainty about Vanessa's involvement. "Because I'm not the only one watching this house." He moved toward the garage door, producing a key from his pocket. "David hired someone too, a man named Corbin, ex-military. He's been parked across the street in a blue sedan for the past 3 days. I think today was supposed to be the day." The garage door unlocked under his key. He turned back to me, his expression grave. "Check your security cameras, the ones your nephew installed yesterday while you were at the attorney's office." "I don't have a nephew," I said, confusion momentarily overriding fear. "Not real cameras, then. But there are devices in your house that weren't there a week ago. Find them." He slipped through the door, calling back softly. "Vanessa will contact you directly when she can. Until then, trust no one." He disappeared, just as heavy footsteps and shouts indicated the police had entered through the broken front door. "Police. Show yourself." I set down the skillet, my arms suddenly too weak to hold it, and called out, "In here! I'm in the laundry room!" 2 officers appeared in the doorway, weapons drawn but pointed downward when they saw me. A trembling older woman, alone in a laundry room. "Mrs. Turner?" The female officer holstered her weapon and approached cautiously. "Are you hurt? Where is the intruder?" "He went through there." I pointed to the garage door. "He claimed to be a private investigator. Said his name was Jack Mercer." The male officer immediately moved to check the garage while his partner guided me to sit on a nearby stool. "Can you tell me what happened?" "Start from when you called 911. I recounted the events as clearly as my scattered thoughts allowed. The fake water department worker, the anonymous text warning, the broken door, and finally Jack Mercer's bizarre claims about Vanessa hiring him to watch David. "He said my son wants to kill me," I finished, the words sounding absurd spoken aloud to this stranger. "For insurance. Money." The officer's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the fleeting look that crossed her face, the one people get when they think they're dealing with a paranoid elderly person. "We'll take your statement and investigate thoroughly," she assured me. "Did this man threaten you directly? Or take anything?" "No, he just warned me about cameras in my house that I didn't install. About someone watching from across the street. About not trusting my son." Her partner returned from the garage. No sign of anyone. Side door was open, though. He could have gone out that way, across the back gardens. The female officer nodded, then turned back to me. "We'll need to take a formal statement. Is there someone who can stay with you? You shouldn't be alone with that front door damaged." "My friend Sandra is coming over soon with her nephew," I said automatically, then froze as I remembered Mercer's words. Not real cameras. Devices that weren't there a week ago. "Actually, I'd prefer to go somewhere else until the door is repaired. Could you check the house first, for surveillance devices?" Another one of those looks passed between the officers, polite skepticism barely masked by professional courtesy. "We can take a quick look," the female officer said gently. "But if you're concerned about surveillance, you might want to hire a professional service." They conducted a perfunctory search, checking obvious places but missing the subtle signs a trained eye might catch. I knew they were humoring me, going through motions to calm what they perceived as an old woman's paranoia. After taking my statement and securing what remained of the front door as best they could, they left with promises to patrol the area and look into Jack Mercer's identity. As their cruiser pulled away, I caught sight of a blue sedan parked down the street, just as Mercer had described. The driver's face was obscured, but I could feel eyes watching the house, watching me. I called, Sandra immediately, "Don't come over," I said as soon as she answered. "It's not safe." "Elaine? What happened? Are you okay?" "Someone broke in. Claimed to be a PI hired by Vanessa to watch David. Says David hired someone too, that there are cameras in my house, that he's planning to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Oh my God." Sandra's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ryan and I are already on our way. We're about 10 minutes out." "No, didn't you hear me? There's someone watching the house right now. A blue sedan across the street. If you come, they'll see. They'll know I have help. Call the police back. They just left. They think I'm being paranoid." Sandra was silent for a moment. "Okay, new plan. Pack a bag. I'm going to call you back in exactly 3 minutes from Margaret's phone. Answer it, keep talking, and go out your back door. Cut through Mrs. Peterson's yard to the alley behind Maple Street. Ryan will be waiting in a silver Honda. Get in, keep your head down, and he'll bring you to me." Margaret was Sandra's sister, who lived in the next town over. It was a good precaution. If someone was monitoring my calls, they wouldn't recognize her number. What about my car? What if they follow it? Leave your keys and phone on the kitchen counter, visible. They'll think you're still in the house, maybe called a repair service for the door. We'll get you a burner phone later. I agreed, then set about gathering essentials: medication, toiletries, a change of clothes, and the insurance documents. I tucked my driver's license, credit cards, and what cash I had into an inner pocket of my jacket. When Margaret's number appeared on my phone precisely 3 minutes later, I answered with forced casualness. "Hello? Yes, this is she." "Start moving," Sandra instructed. "Talk like you're speaking to a door repair company." "Yes, the front door," I said loudly, making my way toward the back of the house. "It was damaged in an attempted break-in. How soon can someone come out?" I slipped through the back door, across my garden, and through the gap in Mrs. Peterson's fence, all while maintaining a one-sided conversation about door measurements and security features. The narrow alley behind Maple Street was empty, except for a silver Honda idling near the corner, as promised. Ryan, Sandra's nephew, was a tattooed man in his 30s with a military crew cut and alert eyes. He reached across to open the passenger door as I approached. "Get in, Mrs. Turner. Keep your head below window level until I say it's clear." I slid into the seat and ducked down, ending the fake call with Sandra. Ryan pulled away smoothly, driving, at a casual pace that wouldn't attract attention. "My aunt filled me in," he said after a few minutes of silence. "For what it's worth, I believe you. Families do ugly things for money. I've seen it before." "Thank you," I murmured, oddly comforted by this stranger's validation. "The PI who broke in, Jack Mercer, he said there were devices in my house that weren't there a week ago. Do you think that's possible?" Ryan's expression hardened. "Very possible. Easy too, especially for someone with regular access to your home. Nanny cams, voice-activated recorders, GPS trackers, they all look innocent enough. Clock radios, phone chargers, even picture frames can hide surveillance equipment these days. But why? If David's planning, what he's planning, why monitor me?" Control. Knowledge is leverage. He needs to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, especially now that you've confronted him about the policies. Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror and relaxed slightly. "We're clear. No tail. You can sit up now." I straightened in my seat, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood recede into the distance. "Where are we going? Not to Sandra's, surely." "No. We figured that's the first place they'd look. We're going to a vacation rental my aunt booked this morning under Margaret's name, paid in cash, no digital trail." The fact that Sandra had thought to take such precautions both reassured and terrified me. This wasn't an overreaction to a misunderstanding. This was serious, coordinated evasion in the face of genuine threat. "Have you heard from Vanessa?" Ryan asked as we turned onto the highway. If what this Mercer guy says is true, she could be a crucial ally. "No. Nothing directly from her. But I haven't exactly been close with my daughter-in-law. We're cordial, but I trailed off, remembering the strain that had developed between us over the years. David always positioned himself as the mediator between us, said we had different values, different perspectives on family. Classic isolation tactic, Ryan commented grimly. Keeping you two separated prevents you from comparing notes, from forming an alliance that might threaten him. We drove in silence for a while, the implications of Ryan's assessment sinking in. Had David been manipulating us both for years, subtly driving wedges, creating an environment where his betrayal could flourish undetected? My phone, left behind as planned, would be filling with missed calls and increasingly concerned texts. By now. David, wondering why I wasn't answering. Wanting to know if I was still coming to dinner. Checking whether his plan was still on track. What happens now? I asked as Ryan exited the highway into an unfamiliar lakeside community. Now you disappear for a bit, regroup, gather evidence, figure out your next move. I'll go back to your house tomorrow, ostensibly to fix the door, and I'll scan for surveillance equipment. Meanwhile, Sandra's lined up a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse cases. You've got options, Mrs. Turner. The vacation rental turned out to be a modest cabin overlooking a small lake, private without being isolated. Sandra was waiting on the porch, rushing to embrace me as soon as Ryan parked. You're safe, she murmured, hugging me tightly. That's what matters most right now. Inside, the cabin was cozy and impersonal in the way all rental properties are. Functional furniture, generic artwork, basic amenities. Sandra had already stocked the kitchen with groceries and set up what looked like a war room on the dining table, laptop, legal pad filled with notes, and a burner phone still in its packaging. I've been doing research, she said, guiding me to sit at the table. And making calls. The PI, Jack Mercer, is legitimate. Licensed in the state, runs a small agency specializing in domestic cases. If Vanessa did hire him, he's qualified for the job. Have you tried contacting Vanessa directly? I asked. Sandra nodded. Cautiously. I called the hospital where she works, said I was a patient trying to follow up. They told me she's taken emergency leave, effective yesterday. Hasn't been to work in 2 days. A cold knot formed in my stomach. You don't think David would hurt his own wife? I don't know. But her sudden absence is concerning, especially in light of everything else. Ryan, who had been checking the cabin's security, joined us at the table. If she hired Mercer, she clearly suspects something. And if David realized she was onto him, he didn't need to finish the thought. The implication hung in the air, dark and foreboding. I need to talk to her, I said firmly. If she hired Mercer, if she sent that warning text, she's trying to help me. She might have evidence, something concrete we can take to the police. Can't just call her, Sandra pointed out. If David is monitoring her phone, then we find another way, I insisted. The hospital, her friends. There has to be a way to reach her safely. Ryan looked thoughtful. Actually, there might be. If she's working with Mercer, she might have a secure communication channel already set up. I could try to make contact. Through him. A soft chime from Sandra's phone interrupted us. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. It's from Margaret. David just showed up at my house, looking for you. He told Margaret you were having a mental health crisis, that you've been paranoid, making wild accusations. He has a doctor with him and papers for an emergency psychiatric evaluation. My blood ran cold. He's trying to have me committed? He can't do that. He doesn't have the authority. Doesn't he? Sandra's voice was gentle but pointed. When was the last time you updated your medical power of attorney, Elaine? The realization hit me like a physical blow. After Michael died, I had signed papers making David my medical proxy. It had seemed like the responsible thing to do, ensuring someone could make decisions if I was incapacitated. I never imagined those papers could be weaponized against me. He could claim you're a danger to yourself, Ryan said grimly. With the right doctor willing to sign off, with your recent paranoid behavior, calling 911 on a water department worker, claiming your son is trying to kill you, he could potentially get a temporary hold, enough to get you into a facility. Where accidents happen, Sandra finished softly. Where medications get mixed up. Where a determined person with medical knowledge might find opportunities. Vanessa, I breathed, the pieces suddenly locking into place. She's a nurse. She'd know exactly how to spot that kind of tampering. That's why she hired Mercer. She saw the insurance policies, she knows about David's medical background, and she realized what he might be planning. Ryan was already heading for the door. I'm going to find Mercer. If Vanessa is in danger too, we need to move quickly. As the door closed behind him, Sandra took my hand. We need to contact Walter again, revoke David's power of attorney immediately, and file for an emergency protective order. I nodded, my mind racing ahead. And check my accounts. If he's trying to have me committed, he might also be trying to gain financial control. Sandra's expression was solemn. Elaine, you need to be prepared for how ugly this might get. Going public with these accusations against your son, it will change everything. Your relationship, your standing in the community, how people see you. Some won't believe you. Some will blame you. I know, I said quietly. But the alternative is worse. As if on cue, the burner phone Sandra had purchased rang shrilly, startling us both. She answered cautiously. Hello? Her eyes widened as she listened. Then she wordlessly handed the phone to me. Elaine? The voice was familiar, though strained, with fear and exhaustion. It's Vanessa. Thank God Sandra found you. You need to stay hidden. David knows you're onto him, and he's escalating the timeline. He's coming for you tonight. Vanessa? My voice caught in my throat. Where are you? Are you safe? For now. Her voice was hushed, as if speaking too loudly might give away her location. I'm at a motel off Highway 16. David thinks I'm at a conference in Portland. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. The text warning me not to open the door was, that you? Yes. Mercer told me about the fake utility worker. When I couldn't reach you directly, I used a temporary number. She paused, her breathing uneven. Elaine, I found evidence. Receipts for various compounds in David's desk drawer. Potassium chloride, digoxin, warfarin. Nothing that would raise flags individually, but together. A lethal cocktail, I finished. Cold dread pooling in my stomach. With Vanessa's nursing background, she'd recognize these substances immediately. Heart medications and blood thinners that in the wrong doses could trigger cardiac arrest or stroke. Especially in someone my age. He's been researching untraceable poisons for months, Vanessa continued. I found browser history on our shared laptop. Articles on medications that mimic natural deaths, deteriorating conditions in the elderly, and he's been logging your habits. What? You eat? When you take your medications? Your daily routines? Sandra, who had been listening intently, scribbled urgently on a notepad. Record this call. I nodded, putting the phone on speaker and motioning for her to start recording. When did you first become suspicious? I asked Vanessa, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 months ago. I found the first insurance policy by accident while looking for our tax documents. When I confronted David, he was so convincing. Said it was just financial planning, that he'd meant to discuss it with you. I wanted to believe him. Her voice cracked. But then I overheard him on the phone with someone discussing how to make a natural transition look legitimate. He used your name, mentioned the policy payout. That's when you hired Mercer? Yes. I needed evidence, something concrete. I couldn't go to the police with just suspicions, especially against a respected doctor. Another piece clicked into place. Of course, David wasn't just my son. He was Dr. David Turner, a cardiologist with an impeccable reputation in the medical community. Any accusation against him would need to be irrefutable. "Did you know about the second policy?" I asked. "The additional $3 million?" Vanessa's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. $3 million? No, I only knew about the first one. When was this taken out? Last month, apparently. The timing aligned perfectly with their failed fertility treatments and decision to adopt. David claimed it was your idea. My idea? Vanessa's voice rose, indignant. I've been fighting to stop this. Elaine, David's been gaslighting both of us, playing us against each other. You need to understand. He's not the man either of us thought he was. Sandra held up the notepad again. Ask about her safety plan. Vanessa, what's your next move? Do you have somewhere safe to go if David realizes you're not at that conference? Mercer arranged a place, but I'm more worried about you. David was furious when he realized you knew about the policies. He called someone. I think it was his colleague, Dr. Harding. They've worked together for years. I only caught fragments, but they were discussing involuntary psychiatric holds, chemical sedation. He said it needed to happen tonight. The cabin suddenly felt colder, the shadows deeper. David and his medical colleague were plotting my detainment, perhaps my death, with the clinical precision of men accustomed to making life or death decisions. We need to go to the police, I said firmly. With both of us making statements, with the evidence you've gathered, it's not that simple, Vanessa. Cut in. David's already laying groundwork with local authorities. He reported concerns about your mental state 3 weeks ago, said you were showing signs of paranoid delusions. And Dr. Harding sits on the board that reviews involuntary commitment cases. My hands began to tremble. How thoroughly he had prepared, constructing a narrative that would allow him to dismiss any accusation I might make as the ravings of a deteriorating mind. There's something else, Vanessa continued, her voice dropping even lower. I think someone's been in our house. Things moved, files disturbed. And yesterday, the brakes on my car felt strange, too soft, almost unresponsive. I took it to a mechanic who found evidence of tampering. A chill ran through me. You think David? I don't know. Maybe he suspects I'm onto him. Maybe he's decided I'm a liability, too. The fear in her voice was raw, unfiltered. I've compiled everything I've found, documents, recordings, photographs, in a secure cloud folder. I'm sending you the access information now. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you, I interrupted, unwilling to entertain the possibility. We're going to fix this. There was a moment of silence. Then Vanessa asked quietly, Do you hate me, Elaine? For not seeing it sooner? For not believing you when you first suspected him? The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, despite the years of polite distance between us, I felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness toward my daughter-in-law. No, Vanessa. You're as much a victim in this as I am. I should have known, she insisted, self-recrimination, heavy in her voice. There were signs. The way he controlled our finances isolated me from my friends. How he always positioned himself as the reasonable one, the stable one. And the adoption. He was so specific about wanting an infant, a blank slate with no medical history. I thought it was about giving a child the best start, but now I wonder if he was looking for another insurance policy, I finished grimly. Another life he could control, potentially profit from. Sandra, who had been silently recording our conversation, suddenly tapped my shoulder and pointed to her phone. A news alert was lighting up her screen. Local doctor's wife missing after suspicious accident. Vanessa, I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. Are you checking the news? No, I've been avoiding it. Why? Sandra turned her phone so I could read the full headline. David had reported Vanessa missing, claiming she never arrived at her Portland conference. Her car had been found abandoned near a notoriously dangerous curve on Highway 16, not far from where she now hid. "He's reported you missing," I told her, feeling sick. "Your car was found on Highway 16. They're describing it as a suspicious accident." The silence that followed was deafening. When Vanessa finally spoke, her voice was hollow with horror. "He's framing me for my own disappearance, creating a narrative where I either had an accident or—" She didn't finish the thought. "Or ran away," Sandra supplied grimly. "Either way, if something happens to Elaine now, he's established reasonable doubt. The unstable mother-in-law with paranoid delusions, the missing wife who might have fled. Rather than face consequences, he's creating alternative suspects." The cabin door opened, and Ryan stepped inside, his expression grim. Jack Mercer followed, looking more disheveled than when he'd broken into my house, a darkening bruise visible along his jawline. "We've got trouble," Ryan announced. "David's filed a missing person report on you too, Mrs. Turner. Claims you've been exhibiting signs of dementia, wandered off in a confused state. Every law enforcement agency in 3 counties is looking for you, as a vulnerable elder, not a potential victim." Mercer stepped forward. "They've frozen your accounts too. Emergency conservatorship hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." "He's moving faster than I anticipated," Vanessa said from the phone. "He must have realized I'm not actually at the conference." Mercer's head snapped toward the phone. "Vanessa? Is that you? Where are you?" "Motel off Highway 16, room 27. But I don't think it's safe here anymore. If David reported me missing, if my car was found nearby—" "Stay put," Mercer cut in. "I'll come get you. Don't open the door for anyone else." As Mercer turned to leave, I called after him. "What about the evidence? The surveillance in my house?" "Found 4 devices," he confirmed. "Audio recorders disguised as power strips, AEI camera hidden in your bedroom alarm clock, another in the living room TV soundbar. Been there at least a month, based on the dust patterns. The violation of it, being watched in my most private moments, my conversations recorded, my movements tracked, sent a wave of nausea through me. Even as horror flooded through me, a strange clarity followed. There was no room left for doubt or second-guessing. My son, the boy I had raised and loved, had methodically planned my demise for the insurance payout, manipulating everyone around him in the process. "We need a lawyer," I said, turning to Sandra. "Now, before that conservatorship hearing." Sandra nodded. "I've already called Patrick Donahue. He's the best elder law attorney in the state, specializes in combating financial exploitation. He's meeting us here in an hour." Vanessa's voice came through the phone again, strained and urgent. "Elaine, there's something else. I think David may have harmed patients, people who fit a certain profile. Elderly, wealthy, without close family. 3 patients died unexpectedly under his care last year. All had recently updated their wills, naming charitable foundations as beneficiaries. The same foundation where David sits on the board. The implication was staggering. If David had harmed his own patients, if his predation extended beyond family to those under his medical care, this was no longer just about my survival. Others might be at risk. "We need to contact the medical board," I said. "The hospital ethics committee. Anyone who might be able to investigate his patient records." "Already on it," Mercer said from the doorway. "Filed an anonymous tip yesterday. But these investigations take time, and right now, our priority is keeping you and Vanessa alive." As he left to retrieve Vanessa, Ryan began methodically securing the cabin, checking windows, doors, sight lines from neighboring properties. "This place won't stay safe for long," he warned. "Once they start a serious search for either of you, a rental property under Margaret's name will be easy to find. We need to move you again, somewhere completely off the grid." Sandra squeezed my hand. "My cousin has a hunting cabin in the mountains. No electricity, no cell service, but no paper trail either. Patrick can meet us there instead." The idea of hiding in a remote cabin running from my own son felt surreal. This time last week, my biggest concern had been which countries to visit on my retirement travels. Now I was a fugitive, labeled confused and dangerous to myself, my autonomy hanging by a thread. "What about the evidence?" I asked, practical concerns cutting through the emotional turbulence. "If my accounts are frozen, if I'm declared incompetent, will any of this even matter?" "That's why we need Patrick," Sandra insisted, "to fight the conservatorship, to present evidence of David's plot. He can file for emergency protective orders for both you and Vanessa." A notification sound from Sandra's phone interrupted us. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting from concern to alarm. "It's from Margaret again. David just left her house. But he said something, that he'd been tracking your heart medication refills, that you're due for a dose at 6 p.m. He seemed very focused on this, insisted that when found, you should take your medication immediately. That skipping doses could be catastrophic." My blood ran cold. The small pill case in my purse suddenly felt like it contained live ammunition, rather than the heart medication I'd taken daily for the past 3 years. Medication David had prescribed, that he adjusted periodically, that arrived by mail order, pharmacy in sealed bottles I never questioned. "Don't take your medication," Ryan said immediately, his voice sharp with urgency. "Not a single pill. We need to have it tested." I nodded numbly, struggling to process the implications. For how long had my daily medication routine been a potential murder weapon? Weeks? Months? Years? Had my occasional dizzy spells, the fatigue, I'd attributed to aging, been side effects of slow poisoning rather than natural deterioration? "The water," I whispered, remembering the glass David had so carefully handed me just days ago. "The groceries he brought. The tea he kept encouraging me to drink for my heart health." Each memory took on a sinister new meaning, acts of care revealed as calculated steps toward my demise. A knock at the cabin door sent us all into high alert. Ryan moved to the window, peering cautiously through the blinds before relaxing slightly. "It's Patrick Donahue," he confirmed, moving to open the door. The attorney who entered was younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with keen eyes and a briefcase that looked like it had weathered many battles. He introduced himself with a brisk handshake and immediate focus. "Mrs. Turner, I understand the situation is urgent. I've reviewed the preliminary information Sandra sent, and I've already filed motions to block the emergency conservatorship. Hearing pending evidence review. Now, I need to hear everything directly from you." For the next hour, I recounted every detail: the insurance policies, the forged signatures, the surveillance devices, Vanessa's discoveries, the pattern of potential patient exploitation. Patrick took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never once displaying disbelief or skepticism. "They're building a mental incompetence case," he said when I finished. "It's unfortunately common in elder exploitation situations, but they've made mistakes. The forged documents, the surveillance without consent, these are criminal offenses that undermine their claim of acting in your best interest." "What about the conservatorship hearing tomorrow?" Sandra asked. "I've filed for a continuance on grounds of due process violations, but we need to prepare for the possibility it proceeds as scheduled. If that happens, Mrs. Turner needs to appear, lucid, composed, and with medical evidence contradicting any claim of cognitive impairment." "Medical evidence?" I echoed. "How do we get that in time?" "I've arranged for a geriatric psychiatrist to meet us at the courthouse tomorrow, Dr. Eleanor Winters. She specializes in testifying in competency hearings and can perform an evaluation immediately before the proceedings." A new text arrived on Sandra's phone. She checked it, relief washing over her features. "It's Ryan. He and Mercer have Vanessa. They're on their way here now." Patrick nodded approvingly. "Her testimony will be crucial, as will the evidence she's collected." Another knock at the door startled us all. Ryan had texted just moments ago. He couldn't possibly have arrived already. Patrick moved to the window, caution evident in his controlled movements. His body stiffened as he peered outside. "Police," he whispered. "2 officers on the porch." Sandra and I exchanged alarmed glances. How had they found us so quickly? "Let me handle this," Patrick said, composing his features into professional calm. "I'm your attorney. Anything you say to law enforcement goes through me." He opened the door just enough to present himself without revealing the cabin's occupants. "Good evening, officers. Patrick Donahue, attorney. How can I help you?" "We're looking for Elaine Turner," came a gruff male voice. "We have reason to believe she's at this location. May I ask the nature of your inquiry?" Patrick's tone remained respectfully neutral. "Welfare check. Her son reported her missing, possibly confused and in need of medical attention. We have an order for emergency psychiatric evaluation." Patrick didn't flinch. "I represent Mrs. Turner. She is safe, not missing, and not in need of emergency intervention. I'll be happy to bring her to the station tomorrow to resolve any concerns. But I'll need to see the order you've referenced." There was a rustling of papers. Then Patrick stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Through the window, I watched, him examining documents, his expression grave but unreadable. When he returned inside minutes later, his face was tight with controlled urgency. "They have a legitimate order, signed by Judge Harding, Dr. Harding's brother. If you're found here, they can take you for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. But that's enough time for—" I couldn't finish the thought. "For anything to happen, Patrick," confirmed grimly. "Especially with David's medical connections. We need to move you now. Is there a back exit?" Sandra nodded, already gathering our belongings. "Through the kitchen, down to the lake. There's a dock with a small boat. But what about the officers?" Patrick's smile was thin but determined. "I'm going to give them a lengthy explanation of elder rights law, jurisdiction limitations, and procedural requirements for competency evaluations. Should buy you about 10 minutes. Go now." As Sandra guided me toward the back door, Patrick added, "Quietly, head to the courthouse. Dr. Winters will meet you at the south entrance at 8 a.m. I'll be there with Vanessa's evidence." "And Mrs. Turner?" His gaze met mine, unwavering. "Don't take any medication, don't consume anything you haven't personally purchased, and don't trust anyone who claims to be helping on David's behalf." We slipped out the back door as Patrick launched into what sounded like a complicated legal dissertation, his voice carrying easily to where the officers waited on the front porch. The night air was cool against my face as Sandra and I hurried down the path toward the small wooden dock where a rowboat waited, tethered and gently bobbing in the dark water. The lake stretched before us, a vast expanse of blackness broken only by the distant lights of other cabins along its perimeter. "Can you row?" Sandra whispered as we climbed carefully into the boat. "Better than you," I replied, finding a moment of grim humor despite everything. "Michael and I used to take the boys fishing every summer, remember?" As I settled at the oars, memories surfaced unbidden. David at 12, laughing as he helped me row across this very lake, his small hands wrapped around the oar handles beneath mine, his face tilted up to catch the summer sun. The boy who had once been the center of my world was now orchestrating my destruction. I pushed off from the dock, the boat sliding silently into the darkness as flashlight beams appeared at the back of the cabin. Our 10 minutes had dwindled to seconds. "Stay low," I murmured to Sandra as I began to row, each pull of the oars taking us further from pursuit and deeper into uncertainty. Behind us, voices carried across the water, the officers discovering our escape, Patrick's continued legal objections, a radio crackling with the beginnings of a wider search. We were officially fugitives now, fleeing not from justice but toward it, racing against a carefully constructed web of deception that threatened to ensnare us both. As the cabin lights receded into the distance, I fixed my eyes on the far shore, on the journey ahead, on the confrontation that would inevitably come. My son had offered me water laced with betrayal. Tomorrow I would offer him truth and watch as he drowned in it. The far shore emerged from the darkness like a promise, the silhouetted trees gradually taking form as I rowed steadily toward them. My arms burned with exertion, unused to this kind of sustained effort, but fear and determination kept me pulling against the water's resistance. "There's a public boat ramp about a quarter-mile south," Sandra whispered, keeping her head low. "Ryan said he'd try to meet us there if they had to change plans." Red and blue lights pulsed along the shoreline behind us, reflecting off the lake's surface in eerie, rippling patterns. The local police had arrived in force, their searchlights sweeping across the water in methodical arcs that we narrowly avoided by staying close to the shadows of overhanging trees along the shore. "Do you think Patrick is all right?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the gentle splash of the oars. "He's faced worse than small-town cops with questionable orders," Sandra assured me. "Legal eagles like him live for these moments. He'll stall them, challenge the paperwork, demand supervisor approval, all perfectly by the book while giving us time to get clear." As we approached the boat ramp, I scanned the deserted parking area nervously. No sign of Ryan's silver Honda, no sign of pursuit either, just an empty stretch of gravel ghostly in the moonlight. "We can't stay here," I said, guiding the boat toward a cluster of cattails and tall reeds rather than the open ramp. "Too exposed." Sandra nodded, already typing, rapidly on her phone. "Ryan says they had to take an alternate route. Police checkpoints on the main roads. They've got Vanessa, they're safe. But it'll be another hour before they can reach us." An hour felt like an eternity when every minute increased the risk of discovery. I secured the boat in the reeds, concealing it as best I could, then helped Sandra onto the marshy bank. Our shoes sank into the soft earth, leaving tracks we could do nothing about. "There's a 24-hour diner about half a mile inland," Sandra said, orienting herself with her phone's compass. "We could wait there, blend in with the late-night crowd." It was our best option. Moving through the woods in darkness risked injury. Waiting by the lake risked capture. At least the diner offered the camouflage of normality and the practical benefits of warmth and rest. We made our way along the edge of the woods, avoiding the main road until the diner's neon sign came into view, a garish beacon of ordinary life that now seemed like sanctuary. Through the windows, I could see perhaps a dozen customers scattered among the booths and counter seats, truck drivers, night shift workers, insomniacs seeking refuge from solitary darkness. "Remember, we're just two friends getting coffee," Sandra murmured as we approached the entrance. "Nothing suspicious, nothing memorable." The bell above the door jangled cheerfully as we entered, drawing a few incurious glances that quickly returned to coffee cups and phone screens. A tired-looking waitress with a name tag reading Darlene gestured vaguely toward the empty booths. "Sit anywhere, ladies. Coffee's fresh." We chose a booth near the back, positioned so we could see both the entrance and the parking lot through the windows. The vinyl seats squeaked beneath us, the table slightly sticky from hasty cleaning. Under different circumstances, I might have found the place depressing, but in that moment, its very mundanity felt like a shield. Darlene shuffled over with a coffee pot. "Just passing through?" Her tone suggested she didn't particularly care about the answer. "Meeting family," Sandra replied smoothly. "Our ride's running late." Menus are there if you want food." She filled our cups with practiced efficiency, then moved on to her next table. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, realizing only then how cold and stiff my fingers had become from rowing. The adrenaline that had propelled me across the lake was ebbing, leaving exhaustion and a bone-deep chill in its wake. "Try to eat something," Sandra urged quietly, pushing a menu toward me. "We don't know when we'll get another chance." The thought of food made my stomach turn, but I knew she was right. I ordered toast and eggs when Darlene returned, forcing myself to think practically even as my mind churned with fragments of revelations and dangers. "Do you think he's always been like this?" I asked Sandra after Darlene had moved out of earshot. David, I mean. Was there something wrong from the beginning that I missed? Or did something break inside him later? Sandra considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I don't know, Elaine. I've known him since he was a teenager. He was always ambitious, always calculating about his future. But this level of calculation, this coldness, she shook her head. Maybe it was always there, dormant, waiting for the right trigger. Money, I said bitterly. That's all it took. The prospect of inheriting wasn't enough. He needed it now, on his schedule, not mine. It's not just money, Sandra countered gently. It's control. From what Vanessa revealed, this is about who gets to decide. Your life, your home, your legacy. David couldn't bear that you might make choices he didn't approve of. The truth of her assessment stung even as it clarified things. David had always needed to direct, to manage, to be the decisive voice in family matters. When had that need for control metastasized into something so malignant? As if summoned by our conversation, the television mounted in the corner of the diner switched to a late-night news broadcast. The volume was low, but I could clearly see my own face filling the screen, a photo from last year's community fundraiser. The caption beneath read, "Missing elderly woman, family fears dementia-related." Wandering, Sandra tensed beside me, her hand moving instinctively to shield my face from the rest of the diner. But no one was paying attention to the television or to us. "We need that sound," she whispered urgently, sliding out of the booth and approaching the counter. "Excuse me, could you possibly turn that up? That story, it's about our neighborhood." The board cashier obliged, increasing the volume just as the image shifted to David standing outside my house, the very picture of concerned devotion. My son's familiar voice filled the diner, his practiced doctor's tone perfectly calibrated, to convey professional concern layered over personal anguish. "My mother has been showing signs of cognitive decline for several months now," he was saying, his expression a masterful blend of worry and restraint. "We've been trying to get her proper evaluation and care, but she's become increasingly paranoid, refusing help, making concerning accusations. We're just desperate to find her before she comes to harm." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "Dr. Turner, what would you say to your mother if she's watching this now?" David looked directly into the camera, his blue eyes, so like his father's, brimming with what anyone else would read as sincerity. "Mom, we love you. We're not angry. We just want you safe. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're afraid of, please just come home or call us. Everything will be okay if you just let us help you." The segment shifted to the anchor, who provided a tip line number for anyone with information about my whereabouts. "Authorities urge caution if encountering Elaine Turner, as she may be disoriented and distressed. The family has offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to her safe return." Sandra returned to our booth, her face tight with anger. "Crafty bastard. He's turned the entire public into his search party." "And made me look dangerous and unstable in the process," I added, bitterness coating each word. $10,000. Ensures people will be looking very hard. Our food arrived, the eggs and toast suddenly looking like props in an increasingly surreal drama. I forced myself to eat mechanically, knowing I would need the strength, while Sandra kept a vigilant eye on the parking lot. "Ryan's close," she reported after checking a new text. 5 minutes out. He's got Vanessa and Mercer with him." Those 5 minutes stretched like taffy, each second weighted with the possibility of discovery. When headlights finally swept across the parking lot, Sandra tensed until she confirmed it was indeed Ryan's Honda. "Leave cash," she instructed, already sliding out of the booth. "More than enough for the bill. We don't want them remembering us for stiffing them." I placed $30 under my half-empty coffee cup, more than twice what our meal had cost. As we walked toward the door, trying to maintain a casual pace, the bell above the entrance jingled again, admitting 2 uniformed police officers. Sandra pulled me smoothly into the women's restroom before they could fully enter the dining area. "Back window," she whispered, pointing to a small, horizontal window set high in the wall. It would be a tight fit, especially for someone my age, but there was no alternative. Sandra gave me a boost, and I wriggled through the narrow opening, with far less dignity than I would have preferred, dropping into the alley behind the diner with a muffled thud. Sandra followed with considerably more grace, pulling the window shut behind her. Ryan was waiting in the alley, engine running, drivers, window down. "Hurry," he urged, leaning across to push open the rear passenger door. I slid into the back seat, finding myself beside Vanessa, whose pale face and red-rimmed eyes spoke volumes about her own ordeal. She grasped my hand wordlessly as Sandra climbed in beside Ryan, and we pulled away from the diner without headlights, using only the ambient light of the parking lot to navigate until we reached the main road. "We've got about a 4-hour drive ahead of us," Ryan explained, checking his mirrors constantly. "I've mapped a route that avoids major highways and checkpoints. We should make it to the courthouse with time to spare before the hearing." Mercer spoke from the front passenger seat, his voice gruff with exhaustion. "I've uploaded all the evidence to Patrick's secure server and made physical backups. Surveillance recordings from your house, Mrs. Turner. Financial records showing David's recent activities. Vanessa's documentation of the medications and research. It's comprehensive." "Will it be enough?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since this nightmare began. "That depends on the judge," Mercer admitted, "and on how deeply David's influence runs in local legal circles, but having both you and Vanessa present, clearly lucid and aligned in your testimony, significantly strengthens the case." Vanessa squeezed my hand, drawing my attention to her. "I'm so sorry, Elaine," she whispered. "I should have come to you sooner. Should have trusted my instincts the moment I found that first policy." "You were caught in his web too," I replied, gently. "David has always been convincing when he needs to be." She nodded, but the guilt remained etched in the tight lines around her mouth. When I confronted him about the policy, he had this whole explanation ready, about estate planning, about ensuring you'd have the best care if anything happened. He made it sound so reasonable. "But then?" I prompted when she hesitated. "Then I found something in his medical bag. A bottle labeled as vitamin supplements, but the pills inside didn't match the description. I had them tested at the hospital lab. They contained digoxin at nearly 3 times the therapeutic dose. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My trusted son, a doctor sworn to do no harm, had been planning not just insurance fraud, but calculated murder. The water he'd so carefully handed me, the tea he'd urged me to drink, the groceries he'd thoughtfully delivered, all potential vectors for a death designed to appear natural. "Did you confront him about that too?" I asked. Vanessa shook her head, her eyes haunted. "I was afraid. By then I'd seen enough to know something was deeply wrong. That's when I hired Mercer, started gathering evidence instead of confronting him directly." She paused, then added softly, "I still loved him, Elaine. Despite everything. I kept hoping there was an explanation, something that would make sense of it all." The raw pain in her voice mirrored my own conflicted heart. Despite everything we'd discovered, despite the clear evidence of David's betrayal, some small part of me still wanted to believe there was a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything but the cold reality that my only child had calculated the value of my death and found it preferable to my continued existence. "Love makes us vulnerable," I said finally. "To hope, to denial, to manipulation. David counted on that. From both of us." Our conversation fell silent as Ryan navigated dark country roads, taking a circuitous route toward the courthouse where tomorrow's hearing would determine not just my legal competence, but potentially my very survival. The miles passed in a blur, of shadowed trees and occasional isolated farmhouses, each moment taking us closer to a confrontation I had never imagined facing. Sometime in the early morning hours, as the eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly, Vanessa spoke again, her voice stronger now, resolute. "I've been thinking about what happens next," she said. "After the hearing, I mean. Assuming we succeed in blocking the conservatorship and presenting the evidence. David will be arrested," Mercer stated flatly from the front seat. "Insurance fraud at minimum, attempted murder if we can prove it." The clinical assessment of my son's crimes made my stomach clench. "And you, Vanessa? Where does this leave you?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've already spoken to a divorce attorney. The paperwork is prepared. But my concern is broader than just legal separation." She hesitated, then continued with careful precision. "The medical board investigation will take time. Meanwhile, his patients remain vulnerable. And there's the issue of the charities, the foundations he's connected to." "You think he's been embezzling?" Sandra asked, turning in her seat to face us. "I don't know," Vanessa admitted. "But the financial patterns are concerning. Large donations coming in, smaller but significant sums redirected to administrative costs or research initiatives that seem to have limited oversight. It needs proper investigation." The scope of David's potential crimes expanded with each revelation, painting a picture of a man whose moral corruption extended far beyond his plans for my demise. Had I raised a predator? Had I somehow failed to instill the basic human values of compassion and integrity? Or had something broken inside him that no parent could have prevented? "I keep thinking about Michael," I said quietly, naming my late husband for the first time since this ordeal began. What he would say if he could see what David has become. Sandra reached back to touch my knee. "Michael would be standing right beside you, fighting just as hard. And he'd tell you this isn't your fault." "Isn't it, though?" The question escaped before I could contain it. Somewhere along the way, I missed something crucial. Some warning sign, some moment when intervention might have changed his path. "Or maybe," Ryan suggested, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Some people are just wired wrong. Nature versus nurture. The debate never ends, but sometimes the darkness is already there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge." His assessment, clinical and detached, offered a kind of absolution, but one I wasn't ready to accept fully. Parental responsibility couldn't be dismissed so easily, even in the face of adult choices so clearly wrong. The conversation faded as exhaustion claimed us all, the gentle motion of the car lulling everyone but Ryan into uneasy sleep. I drifted, in and out of consciousness, fragments of memories mingling with present fears. David as a child, laughing as he ran through sprinklers on a summer day. David as a medical student, intensity burning in his eyes as he described his ambitions. David standing in my kitchen, extending a glass of water with practiced concern. I awoke fully as the car slowed, turning onto a tree-lined street that led to an imposing courthouse of red brick and white columns. The building's classical facade, designed to inspire confidence in the justice it housed, now loomed like a fortress I would have to breach to reclaim my life. The digital dashboard clock read 7:42 a.m. We had arrived with barely 20 minutes to spare before our scheduled meeting with Dr. Winters. "There's Patrick," Sandra pointed toward a man in a charcoal suit standing near the side entrance, a leather briefcase in one hand and a cardboard tray of coffee cups in the other. Despite what must have been a sleepless night, he looked remarkably composed. Ryan parked in a loading zone, clearly planning a quick drop-off rather than proper parking. "I'll find a legitimate spot and circle back," he said. "Mercer will stay with you until you're safely inside." As we exited the car, Patrick approached quickly, his expression grave but determined. "Dr. Winters is already inside, waiting in a private conference room. We have her scheduled to perform your evaluation 30 minutes before the hearing. Mrs. Turner, how are you holding up?" "I'm ready," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Whatever happens today, I want the truth exposed. He nodded approvingly, handing me one of the coffee cups. That's exactly the clarity we need to demonstrate. The judge assigned to the case is Honorable Caroline Weston. She's fair, thorough, and notably resistant to rushed proceedings or procedural shortcuts. That works in our favor. As we approached the courthouse steps, Patrick suddenly stiffened, his eyes fixed on a point near the main entrance. "Don't look now," he said quietly. But David has just arrived with his attorney. Martin Shelby, aggressive, well-connected, specializes in adult guardianship cases. Despite his warning, I couldn't stop myself from turning slightly, needing to see my son, perhaps for the last time as mother rather than adversary. David stood tall in a perfectly tailored suit, his posture radiating the confident authority he'd cultivated so carefully over the years. Beside him, an older man with steel-gray hair leaned in, speaking animatedly while David nodded. Neither had spotted us yet. "Side entrance," Patrick urged, gently steering our group away from potential confrontation. "Let's get you to Dr. Winters. First, establish your competency officially before they can interrupt." But we had only made it halfway around the building when David's voice rang out behind us, carrying across the courthouse lawn with practiced projection. "Mom, thank God you're safe." I turned instinctively, years of maternal response overriding caution. David was hurrying toward us, his face a perfect mask of relieved concern, hand outstretched as if to embrace me. Patrick stepped smoothly between us. "Dr. Turner, I'm Patrick Donahue, your mother's attorney. Any communication needs to go through me." David's eyes narrowed fractionally, the only crack in his performance. "My mother doesn't need an attorney for a medical evaluation. She needs help." His gaze shifted to meet mine over Patrick's shoulder. "Mom, everyone's been so worried. Let me take you home. We can sort all this out privately, as a family." The practiced concern, the reasonable tone, the subtle implication that outside involvement was unnecessary. I could see now how skillfully he deployed these tactics, how he'd used them throughout our relationship to maintain control. "David," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions swirling inside me. "I think we're past the point of private family discussions, don't you? Especially given the interesting documents my attorney has obtained, insurance policies, surveillance, equipment, altered medication." The facade didn't slip. David was too disciplined for that. But something cold and calculating flashed in his eyes, there and gone in an instant. "You're confused, Mom. These conspiracy theories are exactly why we've been so concerned." He shifted, his attention to Vanessa, genuine surprise registering at her presence. "Van, what are you doing here? You should be resting, recovering from your accident." "I didn't have an accident, David," Vanessa replied, her voice surprisingly strong. "Just like your mother isn't confused or delusional. The game is over." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across David's features, a momentary recalculation, an adjustment to unexpected variables. His attorney approached rapidly, clearly sensing the deteriorating situation. "This is highly inappropriate," Martin Shelby announced, inserting himself into our circle with practiced authority. "Mrs. Turner is subject to an emergency psychiatric evaluation order. Interfering with that process is illegal. As for you, Mrs. Turner," he said, addressing Vanessa directly, "your involvement raises serious questions about your own mental state, given your recent behavior." Patrick remained unruffled. "My client has voluntarily arranged for an independent psychiatric evaluation this morning, prior to the hearing. Dr. Eleanor Winters, whose credentials, I believe, significantly outweigh those of the physician who signed your emergency order, will be testifying to Mrs. Turner's competency. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have an appointment to keep." As Patrick guided us toward the side entrance, David called after us, his voice carrying a new edge of desperation. "Mom, please, don't do this. You don't understand what you're doing." paused, turning back one final time to face the son I had raised, the man he had become. I understand perfectly, David. For perhaps the first time in years, I see things exactly as they are. The real question is, do you? His expression hardened, the pretense of concern falling away completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. "This won't end well for you," he said softly, too quietly for anyone but me to hear. "Some things once started can't be stopped." The threat, delivered with such clinical detachment, should have terrified me. Instead, it steeled my resolve. Whatever happened in the courtroom today, whatever justice might or might not be served, I had already reclaimed something essential: my clarity, my autonomy, my refusal to be manipulated by the very person who had once been the center of my world. I turned away without responding, joining Patrick, Sandra, and Vanessa as we entered the courthouse. Behind us, David remained on the steps, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble beneath his feet. The courthouse interior was a study in contrasts, imposing marble columns and polished wooden benches juxtaposed with fluorescent lighting and metal detectors. As we passed through security, I couldn't help noticing how the officers' eyes lingered on me, no doubt recognizing my face from the missing person reports. Patrick must have noticed too, because he immediately produced a sheaf of documents and addressed the officers directly. "My client, Elaine Turner, is here voluntarily for a competency hearing. She is not missing, nor is she under any form of detention. These papers confirm our scheduled appearance." The officers examined the documents briefly, then waved us through with professional indifference. One small victory. Dr. Eleanor Winters was waiting in a small conference room off the main corridor, a compact woman with silver-streaked dark hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. She rose as we entered, extending her hand first to me. "Mrs. Turner, I'm Dr. Winters. I understand time is short, so with your permission, I'd like to begin the evaluation immediately." I appreciated her directness. "Of course." Patrick turned to the others. "Sandra, Vanessa, if you could wait outside with Mercer. Dr. Winters needs to conduct this assessment privately, and we don't want to create any appearance of coaching or interference." As they left, Dr. Winters gestured for me to take a seat across from her. "I'll be recording this session with your consent. It provides additional evidence of the evaluation's integrity." I nodded my agreement, and she placed a small digital recorder on the table between us. "First, I want to be clear about what I'm assessing," she began, her tone professional but not unkind. "Competency is specifically about your ability to make informed decisions about your own care and finances. It's not about whether your decisions are what others might choose for you, but whether you understand the implications of your choices and can reason through alternatives." "I understand," I said, grateful for her clarity. What followed was a thorough but efficient evaluation. Questions about my personal history, current living situation, financial management, and healthcare. Dr. Winters asked me to interpret hypothetical scenarios, tested my short-term memory and reasoning, and observed my emotional responses throughout. "Mrs. Turner," she said after about 20 minutes, "I'm going to ask you directly about the allegations that led to this hearing. Your son claims you've been experiencing paranoid delusions, specifically the belief that he's trying to harm you for financial gain. Can you tell me about that?" This was the crux of the matter. Could I discuss David's betrayal without appearing irrational or vengeful? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. 3 days ago, I discovered my son had taken out life insurance policies totaling $8 million on me without my knowledge. The policies contain forged signatures and fabricated medical examinations. Since confronting him, I've learned he installed surveillance devices in my home, has been tampering with my medication, and has created a false narrative about my mental. Declined to discredit any accusations I might make. Dr. Winters' expression remained neutral. "And you have evidence of these claims?" "Yes. Documentation of the policies, the surveillance devices that were recovered from my home, witness testimony from my daughter-in-law who discovered his plans, and the altered medication that's currently being tested. She made notes, then asked, "How does it make you feel, believing your son intended you harm?" The question penetrated straight to my heart. "Devastated," I admitted, my voice catching slightly. "Betrayed. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real, that the boy I raised could calculate the value of my death so coldly. But those feelings don't change the facts, and they don't cloud my judgment about what needs to happen now." Dr. Winters studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Mrs. Turner, based on my evaluation, I see no evidence of cognitive impairment, paranoid delusions, or decision-making incapacity. You are fully oriented, your reasoning is sound, and your emotional responses are appropriate to the situation, as you understand it. If the evidence you've described exists, your interpretation represents a rational response rather than paranoia." Relief washed through me, though I knew this was just the first hurdle. Dr. Winters turned off her recorder and stood. "I'll prepare my report immediately and be ready to testify when the hearing begins. You have perhaps 10 minutes before we need to be in the courtroom." Patrick, who had been silently observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate your thoroughness and efficiency." After Dr. Winters left to finalize her report, Patrick turned to me with cautious optimism. "That went well. Her assessment will carry significant weight, especially given her reputation. Now, we need to discuss what happens in the courtroom. Martin Shelby is aggressive. He'll try to provoke emotional responses that make you appear unstable or vindictive." "I understand," I said, steeling myself. "What about the evidence? The policies, the surveillance equipment?" "We have documentation for everything, but the most compelling evidence will be Vanessa's testimony. A spouse turning against her husband, especially with her medical background and direct knowledge of his plans." Patrick's expression turned grave. "However, there's a complication. David's attorney has filed a motion to exclude Vanessa's testimony on grounds of spousal privilege. Can he do that?" The prospect of losing our strongest witness sent a chill through me. "He can try. But spousal privilege has exceptions, particularly in cases involving future crimes or joint victims. We'll fight it." Patrick checked his watch. "It's time. Remember, address your responses to the judge, not to David or his attorney. Speak clearly, stay calm, and if you're uncertain about how to answer something, look to me before responding." Outside the conference room, we rejoined Sandra, Vanessa, and Mercer. Ryan had also returned, his expression grim. "Security's been increased," he reported quietly. "And there's media gathering outside. Someone tipped them off about the hearing." Patrick didn't seem surprised. "David's laying groundwork for public sympathy. If this goes against him, he'll want to control the narrative." We made our way to courtroom C, a wood-paneled chamber already half filled with observers. David and his attorney sat at the respondent's table on the right side of the room. As we entered, David's eyes locked with mine, his expression unreadable. Patrick guided me to the petitioner's table on the left. "Your son tried to file as the petitioner, seeking guardianship over you," he explained under his breath. "Our counterfiling flipped the roles, putting you in the position of defending your autonomy rather than him arguing for control. Small procedural victory, but it matters." The courtroom doors opened again, admitting a distinguished woman in judicial robes. "All rise," called the bailiff. "The Honorable Caroline Weston presiding." Judge Weston took her seat, surveying the room with experienced eyes before addressing the attorneys. "Counselors, I've reviewed the filings in this matter. Before we proceed, I wish to address the motion regarding spousal privilege." Martin Shelby rose immediately. "Your Honor, my client's wife is clearly acting under duress and emotional distress. Her statements are unreliable and potentially self-serving, as the couple is experiencing marital difficulties. Furthermore, any private communications between them fall squarely under spousal privilege. Patrick countered smoothly. Your Honor, spousal privilege cannot be used to shield ongoing criminal activity. Mrs. Vanessa Turner witnessed actions that constitute insurance fraud at minimum and attempted murder at worst. The crime fraud exception clearly applies. Judge Weston considered briefly. I'll allow Mrs. Turner's testimony, subject to evaluation of credibility and relevance as we proceed. Now, let's begin with opening statements. Mr. Donahue? Patrick rose, his posture confident but not arrogant. Your Honor, this case fundamentally concerns an attempted exploitation of an elder by her physician's son. Elaine Turner, a competent 65-year-old woman with no history of cognitive impairment, discovered that her son, Dr. David Turner, had fraudulently obtained life insurance policies totaling $8 million on her life, installed surveillance, equipment in her home without consent, and appears to have been tampering with her medication. When Mrs. Turner confronted him, Dr. Turner began constructing a false narrative of mental decline to discredit her and gain control of her person and assets. The evidence we'll present today will clearly demonstrate that Mrs. Turner is competent, that her son's petition is not made in good faith, and that the court should not only deny guardianship, but refer this matter for criminal investigation. Martin. Shelby rose for the respondent's opening, his voice carrying the practiced resonance of a career courtroom orator. Your Honor, this is a deeply unfortunate family situation in which a devoted son has been forced to seek intervention for a mother experiencing paranoid delusions. Dr. David Turner, a respected cardiologist, has observed concerning cognitive changes in his mother over recent months. When he attempted to arrange proper evaluation and care, Mrs. Turner fled her home, making wild accusations that her son was trying to harm her. The insurance policies in question are standard estate planning tools that Mrs. Turner simply doesn't recall discussing. Dr. Turner has acted solely out of concern for his mother's well-being, and we ask the court to approve temporary guardianship while appropriate medical treatment can be arranged. The two narratives hung in the air, irreconcilable, versions of the same family tragedy. Judge Weston turned to Patrick. Call your first witness, counselor. The petitioner calls Dr. Eleanor Winters. Dr. Winters took the stand, was sworn in, and presented her credentials. Board certification in geriatric psychiatry, 20 years of experience in competency evaluations, and numerous scholarly publications on elder care. Dr. Winters, Patrick began, did you evaluate Elaine Turner this morning? I did. And what was your conclusion regarding her competency? Dr. Winters spoke with clinical precision. I found Mrs. Turner to be fully oriented, with intact cognitive function across all domains. Her reasoning, judgment, and insight are well preserved. She demonstrates appropriate emotional responses to her circumstances and a clear understanding of her financial and medical decisions. In my professional opinion, she demonstrates no signs of dementia, psychosis, or any condition that would impair her decision-making capacity. Patrick nodded. Thank you, doctor. Your witness, counselor. Martin Shelby approached the witness stand, his expression skeptical. Dr. Winters, you conducted your evaluation less than an hour ago, correct? After Mrs. Turner had been missing for days, potentially under the influence of individuals with their own agendas? That is correct regarding the timing, Dr. Winters replied calmly. However, my evaluation included protocols specifically designed to identify coaching or rehearsed responses. Mrs. Turner's cognitive function is objectively measurable and was entirely consistent with normal aging, not impairment. Shelby shifted. Tactics. You're aware that paranoid delusions can be highly specific, leaving other cognitive functions intact? A person can appear entirely rational while maintaining a single fixed false belief. I am familiar with delusional disorders, yes. However, such conditions typically show other signs: internal consistency of the delusion regardless of contradictory evidence, inability to consider alternative explanations, and often a history of similar thought patterns. Mrs. Turner exhibits none of these features. Moreover, she can provide specific, verifiable evidence for her claims, which is inconsistent with delusional thinking. After several more attempts to undermine Dr. Winter's assessment, Shelby returned to his seat, visibly frustrated. Judge Weston turned to Patrick. Next witness? The petitioner calls Vanessa Turner. Vanessa walked to the witness stand, her steps measured, her gaze deliberately avoiding David. After being sworn in, she sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap to conceal their slight trembling. Mrs. Turner, Patrick began, what is your relationship to the parties in this case? I am David Turner's wife of 7 years and Elaine Turner's daughter-in-law. And what is your professional background? I'm a registered nurse specializing in geriatric care. I've worked at Riverside Memorial Hospital for 10 years. Patrick nodded. Please tell the court when and how you first became aware of the life insurance policies taken out on Elaine Turner. Vanessa took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I was searching for our tax documents in David's home office when I found the first policy paperwork. It was for $5 million, naming David as the beneficiary. I had never seen it before, and as far as I knew, Elaine wasn't aware of it either. What did you do with this information? I confronted David. He told me it was routine estate planning, that his mother had agreed to it but probably forgot due to what he called her memory issues. He was very convincing, and initially, I believed him. What changed your mind? Vanessa's voice steadied as she continued. Several things. First, I realized Elaine wasn't showing any actual signs of memory impairment during our interactions. Second, I overheard David on the phone discussing how to make a death appear natural and mentioning insurance verification periods. Finally, I found medications in his medical bag that didn't match their labels, specifically heart medications at potentially lethal doses. David shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching visibly. Martin Shelby scribbled notes furiously, preparing for cross-examination. What actions did you take based on these discoveries? Patrick continued. I hired a private investigator, Jack Mercer, to document David's activities. I also began collecting evidence, photographs of the mislabeled medications, recordings of concerning conversations, copies of the insurance documentation. When I discovered surveillance equipment had been installed in Elaine's home, I became convinced that David intended to harm his mother for the insurance money. Patrick submitted the collected evidence as exhibits, then asked, Mrs. Turner, has your husband made any statements to you directly regarding his mother's house or assets? Yes, Vanessa confirmed. He frequently expressed frustration that Elaine was considering selling her house to fund retirement travel. He called it squandering his inheritance and said he might need to accelerate the timeline. At the time, I interpreted this as concern about his mother's financial decisions. In retrospect, I believe he was referring to his plan to claim her assets before she could use them. As Vanessa's testimony continued, I watched David's face. The mask of concerned son had completely fallen away, replaced by cold calculation as he whispered urgently to his attorney. He was strategizing, adapting, looking for weaknesses to exploit. A predator cornered, but not defeated. When Patrick finished his direct examination, Martin Shelby approached Vanessa with theatrical concern. Mrs. Turner, isn't it true that you and my client have been experiencing marital difficulties, particularly following your recent fertility treatment failures? Patrick immediately objected. Relevance, Your Honor. Mrs. Turner's reproductive history has no bearing on this matter. I'm establishing potential bias and motive, Your Honor, Shelby countered smoothly. Judge Weston considered briefly. I'll allow limited questioning on this line, but tread carefully, Counselor. Shelby turned back to Vanessa. Mrs. Turner, after learning you couldn't conceive, didn't you become increasingly resentful of my client's relationship with his mother? Weren't you upset that his attention and resources were divided? Vanessa's expression remained composed. No. Our fertility. Challenges were difficult for both of us, but they had nothing to do with Elaine. I've always respected their relationship. Yet you went behind your husband's back to hire a private investigator. You didn't discuss your concerns with him directly. I tried to discuss my concerns after finding the first insurance policy. His explanations didn't add up. When I later discovered the altered medications, I feared direct confrontation might put Elaine at risk if he realized I suspected him. Shelby switched tactics. Mrs. Turner, as a nurse, you have access to various medications. Isn't it possible that you planted the supposedly altered medications yourself to create evidence against my client during a failing marriage? Vanessa's eyes widened in genuine shock. Absolutely not. I would never endanger a patient or fabricate evidence. That's completely false. Yet you admit to taking photographs of your husband's private medical bag, copying confidential documents, and recording conversations without consent. These aren't the actions of someone with clean hands, are they? Patrick stood. Objection. Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness and attempting to criminalize reasonable actions taken to document suspected elder abuse. Sustained, Judge Weston ruled. Mr. Shelby, restrict your questions to relevant facts, not character attacks. Shelby's cross-examination continued for another 20 minutes, attempting to portray Vanessa as unstable, vindictive, and unreliable. Through it all, she maintained her composure, refusing to be provoked into emotional outbursts that might undermine her credibility. Finally, Patrick called me to the stand. As I was sworn in, I felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom, the judge evaluating my competency with each word and gesture, David calculating his next move, spectators hungry for the drama of family betrayal. Mrs. Turner, Patrick began. Gently, please tell the court about your current living situation and health status. I spoke clearly, focusing on Judge Weston as Patrick had advised. I'm a 65-year-old widow. Until recently, I lived independently in the home my late husband and I purchased 40 years ago. I have managed my own finances, health care, and daily activities without assistance. I have controlled hypertension treated with medication, but no other significant health issues. When did you first become aware of the life insurance policies your son had taken out on you? 3 days ago. I had an appointment with my attorney, Walter Breslin, to update my will. He mentioned discovering policies totaling $8 million with my son as beneficiary, containing what appeared to be forged signatures and fabricated medical examinations. I recounted the subsequent events, confronting David, discovering the surveillance devices, learning about the medication tampering, and fleeing when it became clear that David was attempting to have me involuntarily committed. Mrs. Turner, Patrick asked carefully, your son has suggested that you've been experiencing memory problems and paranoid thinking. Have you noticed any changes in your cognitive function? No, I haven't. I occasionally misplace my keys or forget an appointment, as most people do, but nothing that interferes with my daily functioning or decision-making. I've had no history of mental illness, no head injuries, no cognitive concerns raised by any physician I've actually seen. And how would you characterize your relationship with your son before these events? The question struck at the heart of my pain. I thought we were close, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. After my husband died 5 years ago, David became more involved in my life, checking on me frequently, offering health advice, discussing my retirement plans. I interpreted it as caring. Now I realize he was positioning himself to control my assets. Patrick nodded sympathetically. What would you like the court to understand most clearly about your situation? I met Judge Weston's gaze directly. Your Honor, I'm not fighting this guardianship petition out of pride or stubbornness. I'm fighting because the evidence shows my son, whom I trusted completely, has been systematically plotting to take control of my life and assets, potentially to end my life for financial gain. I'm competent to manage my own affairs, and frankly, I'm terrified of being placed under the control of someone who has demonstrated such calculated betrayal. Martin Shelby's cross-examination was predictably aggressive, focusing on minor inconsistencies in my timeline, suggesting that my suspicions were baseless, and repeatedly returning to the theme that devoted sons don't suddenly become murderers without cause. Mrs. Turner, he pressed, isn't it more likely that you've misinterpreted innocent actions? That perhaps your son obtained these policies with your consent during a period of forgetfulness? That the supposed surveillance was actually safety monitoring for an aging parent? That your perception has been clouded by isolation and grief since your husband's passing? No, I replied firmly. Forged signatures aren't a misinterpretation. Hidden cameras in my bedroom aren't safety monitoring. Altered medication isn't an innocent action. I've provided evidence for each of these claims, while my son has offered only vague assertions about my supposed mental decline. After I stepped down, Patrick called Jack Mercer to authenticate the surveillance equipment recovered from my home and testify about his observations of David's activities. Walter Breslin followed, confirming the insurance policies and the apparent forgery of my signatures. Finally, the formal evidence phase concluded, and Judge Weston called for closing arguments. Martin Shelby went first, painting a portrait of a concerned son desperately trying to help a mother in denial about her deteriorating condition. Your Honor, he concluded, temporary guardianship would allow for proper medical evaluation in a controlled environment, after which permanent arrangements can be determined based on expert recommendations. Dr. Turner asks only for the opportunity to ensure his mother receives appropriate care. Patrick's closing was measured, but forceful. Your Honor, the evidence presented today shows not a concerned son, but a calculated predator. The insurance policies, the surveillance, the medication, tampering, these are not actions taken out of love or concern. They represent a systematic attempt to control, exploit, and potentially harm a competent elder for financial gain. Mrs. Turner has demonstrated clear cognitive capacity and sound judgment, including the judgment to protect herself from her son's actions. We ask not only that you deny the guardianship petition, but that you issue a protective order preventing Dr. Turner from contacting his mother and refer this matter for criminal investigation. Judge Weston considered both arguments silently, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. This court takes allegations of elder exploitation extremely seriously, as well as the fundamental right of competent adults to make their own decisions. Based on the testimony and evidence presented today, I find that Elaine Turner is fully competent to manage her own affairs and that significant questions exist regarding the motives behind this guardianship petition. Relief began to wash over me, but the judge wasn't finished. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary protective order prohibiting Dr. David Turner from contacting Elaine Turner directly or indirectly, from entering her property, or from making medical or financial decisions on her behalf. I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office and the State Medical Board for investigation of potential criminal violations and professional misconduct. David's face drained of color, the magnitude of his defeat apparently exceeding his worst-case scenario. His attorney immediately began whispering urgently in his ear, no doubt outlining appeal options and damage control strategies. This court is adjourned, Judge Weston concluded, rising from the bench. As the bailiff called for all to rise, I caught David's gaze one final time across the courtroom. The mask had fallen completely now, revealing a cold fury and something else, a calculating look that told me this battle, while won, was far from over. As Patrick guided me from the courtroom through a side exit to avoid the waiting media, I felt oddly hollow. The validation of winning, of being believed, couldn't fill the void left by the son I had lost, not to death, but to his own darkness. What happens now? I asked quietly as we joined Sandra, Vanessa, and the others in a private conference room. Patrick's expression was solemn but determined. Now we prepare for what comes next. Criminal investigations move slowly, and David will have resources and connections to fight back. This was just the first round, Mrs. Turner. But it was a decisive victory, and that matters. In that moment, surrounded by allies who had risked their own safety to protect me, I realized that while one family bond had been irrevocably broken, others had formed in its place. Bonds of loyalty, courage, and truth that would sustain me through whatever challenges lay ahead. The water David had offered me was poisoned by betrayal, but I had refused to drink. Instead, I had found my own wellspring of strength, one that would never run dry again. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my Mediterranean cruise ship, watching the sunset paint the islands of Santorini in shades of gold and amber. The breeze carried the scent of salt and distant flowers, a sensory reminder of how far I'd come from the courthouse where my life had nearly been stolen from me. Wine for the birthday girl? Sandra appeared beside me, holding 2 glasses of crisp white wine that caught the fading sunlight. Is it still my birthday when we've been celebrating for 3 days? I laughed, accepting the glass. 66 deserves at least a week, she insisted, clinking her glass against mine. Besides, this trip was long overdue. She was right. This journey, Athens, Santorini, Crete, then onward to Italy, was the retirement adventure I'd planned before David's betrayal had temporarily derailed my life. Reclaiming it felt like the final piece of reclaiming myself. Any regrets? Sandra asked softly, following my gaze toward the horizon. About the trip? None whatsoever. You know what I mean. I sighed, considering the question that still occasionally haunted my quieter moments. About testifying against my own son, about the choices that led us here, some days, but not about protecting myself. Never about that. The months following the courthouse victory had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and painful revelations. The criminal investigation had moved with surprising speed once the district attorney reviewed our evidence. David had been arrested 3 weeks after the hearing, charged with multiple felonies including insurance fraud, forgery, illegal surveillance, and attempted murder. His medical license had been suspended pending investigation, and that investigation had uncovered far worse than we'd initially suspected. 3 patient deaths under his care showed suspicious patterns: elderly patients with substantial estates, no close family, and unexpected cardiac events following medication adjustments. The charitable foundation he helped direct had received substantial bequests from each of them. The case had attracted national attention, spawning true crime podcasts, ethical debates in medical journals, and renewed conversations about elder abuse and exploitation. Through it all, I had maintained my privacy as much as possible, giving only one brief statement through Patrick emphasizing the importance of believing victims and taking elder exploitation seriously. Have you read Vanessa's email? Sandra asked, pulling me back to the present. This morning, the plea deal is finalized. 20 years with possibility of parole after 15. I took a sip of wine, letting the tartness linger on my tongue. She thinks I should attend the sentencing hearing next month. Will you? I shook my head. I've said my piece in the victim impact statement. Seeing him in that courtroom again won't bring closure, only more pain. The truth was that I had already begun the difficult process of separating the son I had raised from the man who had betrayed me. In my mind, they had become distinct entities. The boy who had once brought me dandelion bouquets and the calculating predator who had measured my worth in insurance payouts. It was the only way I could reconcile the love I had given so freely with the harm that had come back to me. How's Vanessa settling in Portland? Sandra changed the subject, sensing my discomfort. Well, I think. The nursing director position was a fresh start, and she's thrown herself into patient advocacy work. We talk every few weeks. A small smile tugged at my lips. She's dating again. Someone she met through her support group for family members of incarcerated people. That's good. She deserved better than she got. We both did, I agreed. But we both found our way forward. My own way forward had begun with reclaiming my home. I'd had the entire house swept for additional surveillance devices, then renovated extensively, changing the layout and decor until it felt like a new space unmarked by betrayal. I'd lived there for 6 months before deciding to sell it after. All not because of David's shadow, but because I'd realized the traveling life truly did call to me more than homeownership. The house had sold quickly and well above asking price. The irony wasn't lost on me. The property David had been so desperate to control now belonged to a young family with twins, the walls that had witnessed his betrayal now echoing with children's laughter. "Look," Sandra pointed toward the darkening horizon, where the first stars were becoming visible above the volcanic cliffs. "Make a wish." I smiled at her whimsy but closed my eyes briefly nonetheless. When I opened them, a sense of peace washed over me, as tangible as the sea breeze on my skin. "What did you wish for?" Sandra asked. "That's between me and the star," I replied, smiling. "But I will tell you something I've been thinking about. After Italy, I'm considering extending the trip. Maybe Spain and Portugal, possibly Morocco." Sandra's eyebrows rose. "Extended vacation? Or something more?" "Something more," I admitted. "I've been corresponding with a volunteer organization that places retired professionals in community development projects abroad. They need people with administrative experience for a women's entrepreneurship program in Fez. Elaine Turner, international do-gooder." Sandra grinned. "I like it. It's just an idea for now," I cautioned. "But after everything, I want my remaining years to create something positive. To balance the scales somehow." Sandra's expression turned serious. "You don't need to atone for what David did. His choices weren't your failure. I know that intellectually, but the heart takes longer to convince." I turned to face the islands again, their lights now twinkling against the deepening blue of evening. Besides, it's not really about atonement. It's about purpose, about making sure the story doesn't end with betrayal. We stood in companionable silence as full darkness settled around us, the ship's lights reflecting on the water like earthbound stars. From somewhere below deck, music drifted up, other passengers dancing, celebrating, living their lives unaware of the quiet transformation happening just above them. "You know," Sandra said eventually, "a few days after everything happened, when you were staying at my place and we were still shell-shocked by it all, you asked me a question I couldn't answer then." "What question?" "You asked if you'd ever feel whole again, if the betrayal would always define you." I remembered that night, curled on Sandra's guest bed, hollow with grief, wondering if the broken pieces of my life and my trust could ever be reassembled into something recognizable. "I think I have my answer now," I said softly. 2 weeks later, I stood alone at the Trevi fountain in Rome, a coin held loosely between my fingers. Around me, tourists jostled for the perfect photo angle, lovers entwined on marble benches, and street vendors hawked souvenirs and roses to the unwary. I thought about tradition, the belief that tossing a coin into the fountain ensured a return to Rome, the idea that fate could be negotiated with loose change and symbolic gestures. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Patrick. "Final sentencing complete, 20 years, as expected. Restitution order granted in full. Call when you're ready to discuss foundation details." The foundation had been my idea, taking a portion of the restitution money and David's frozen assets to establish a fund for elder abuse prevention and victim support. Something meaningful rising from the ashes of betrayal. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked at the coin in my palm once more before turning my back to the fountain. With a practiced flick of my wrist, I sent the coin arcing over my shoulder, hearing the small splash as it joined thousands of others in the churning water. Not for a return to Rome, though I wouldn't mind that. Not for luck or love or any of the traditional wishes. I threw the coin for closure. for permission to write the next chapter without the weight of the previous one determining its course. As I walked away from the fountain, merging into the flow of people along the narrow street, I felt lighter than I had in months. The world stretched before me, full of possibilities unbounded by others' expectations or betrayals. David had handed me water tainted with his calculated malice, believing I would drink without question, trusting blindly in the bonds of family. Instead, I had found the strength to set down that poisoned cup and seek my own path, my own truth. The water I chose now was the vast, open sea of a life reclaimed, sometimes turbulent, often beautiful, and always, fundamentally, mine. In refusing his offering, I had saved not just my life, but my soul. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.